This is log 1 of Project Chariot. We are working on the Phaeton I carriage. So you think about the basic concept of what is a carriage. Well, it's a horse, biologics, combined with structure. Artificial structure, to be exact. In this case, it's a little wagon thing pulled by the horse. But essentially, we have meat and wheels. That's what a chariot is, in essence. And that is why we have named the Phaeton I model after a carriage, because that's essentially what this is. It's still meat and wheels. Now, we don't want our cars to be fossil fuel driven. Fossil fuels, when we burn them, they tend to contribute to a condition in our planet that doesn't make sense for a long-term sustainable human civilization. Now, notice I say human there, because we can have alternative forms of civilization. But we'll get to that probably in a later installment. We don't want electric cars because nuclear power, anytime someone makes a mistake, that mistake becomes catastrophic. And because we're bound to make a mistake, it's just not worth it. We also don't want to use electricity because we want the Phaeton I model to be as EMP proof as we can. EMP standing for electromagnetic pulse, which have been known to disable technology. And we don't want that. No. Now, this is how a normal combustion engine works. So imagine, if you will, a syringe. And if you were to have some sort of force on the inside of the syringe, it would push it outwards. Now, gasoline and diesel, whenever you compress them and ignite them, either with fire or electricity or whatever energy source you're going to use, that will create an explosion. So now imagine creating that explosion inside of a confined space. Well, it's going to force something out of that confined space, whether it just completely explodes the vessel or it shoots out something. The shooting out something option is exactly what a piston is. So whenever the combustion reaction occurs, it creates that little explosion that pushes the piston out of the syringe-like casing. And whenever in a baseline vehicle, whenever that piston gets pushed, that's a linear motion. It goes outwards, and then it'll slide back, and then the chamber refills with gas, ignites, and it gets pushed out again. Back and forth, back and forth. That's linear. But wheels rotate. They spin round and round. So we're able to convert linear motion to rotational motion via a piston rod. And essentially what happens is it's a rod that's attached to a little knob on a wheel, except that knob is offset. It's not at the center. So then as it goes back and forth, that will actually spin the wheel, similar to as shown on screen. But anyway, I've been rambling for too long. It's time we get into the real meat of this car, pun intended. Now, we're going to start in this subject, we're going to start with a metal box. We'll cover the topics of biologics and how we're going to keep them alive in a future episode, but for now, I just want you to run with it. So, in the middle, we have these two metal plates. These will eventually become a box, but for right now, you need to see what's inside. There are muscles on either side of a center of a median bone. So this bone, it's a bone, it's strong, it's rigid. However, muscles are able to move back and forth. They contract where they get short and fat, and then they can extend where they get skinny and long. Now, when they're attached to something and they contract and expand, that's going to pull it back and forth and back and forth. Sound familiar? What we're going to do in this design is the muscle will pull back and forth on the bone. Now notice the muscles are on both sides, so you can get on both. On a stroke in either direction, you're still exerting force. Muscles can push and pull, and we have them on both sides of the bone, so we're pretty much maximizing all of the work we can do. Gas engines, on the other hand, they can only provide force during the explosion stage, and that's only one direction. It'll just naturally slide back because of the way it's designed, but there's nothing actually helping it slide back. So, because muscles are slightly weaker, and they're much, much weaker in the sense that they can't provide power in like an initial boom. That's why we have so many of them. We have that array of around 6 muscles. And how are we going to actually connect this to the piston? Well, if you ever heard of hip replacements, or really just any sort of bone surgery where you're augmenting the natural skeletal structures with an artificial component, what we would do is, when we are growing the organism, we'd have the bone anchored to the implant and grown around it. This implant isn't just a random piece of metal sticking out of the bone. The implant is the piston. So whenever these muscles push and pull back and forth, they're going to, by virtue of the rigid bone being connected to the rigid piston, that's also going to move the piston back and forth. Then we simply connect a rod to the piston and then connect a wheel to the rod. Of course we need an axle, but we can solve that problem by just taking an axle and offsetting part of it, so we get that offset place for the piston rod to attach. This is called a crankshaft, and this is used in baseline vehicles. And now all we do is stimulate the muscles. The neural system will move those back and forth, and boom, bada bing, we have a spinning wheel. We have supplied power to a wheel using purely organic components. Do you realize how unheard of this is? This is a creature that would be able to roll around. In reality, all we need to do is keep the biological components alive. And like I said, we'll cover the biologics more and more as we get into future episodes. So I would like to say a disclaimer here. This is just the proof of concept, almost a trailer, if you will, to show you what the basic idea is. This is actually a poor design for a couple of reasons, because, well, one, there's no brakes. There isn't anything to clamp down on the wheel and stop it from spinning. But also, this means that you, with this design with the muscles and their piston attached directly to the wheels, for you to roll, you can't just roll freely like when you let go of a Hot Wheels toy and it rolls on its own. That would actually yank the muscles back and forth and potentially tear them on this design shown on screen. But what we can do is we can actually augment this further and use technology that already exists that's being used in normal vehicles. There's gearboxes, there's all sorts of different ways we can get around this. And then also there's no steering on this. You might have noticed this would just be a wheel that goes in one direction. But again, there are ways around this. We already have the technology to build cars. So think of this as a little bit more of a proof of concept, because you can't quite steer, you can't quite stop, and you can't quite coast. You can't coast along the road. The next episode, we're going to cover the actual drivetrain of the actual Phaeton I model. This is just the prototype. So, for those of you watching saying, oh, this isn't an organism, oh, this is unhinged, oh, this is quote-unquote insanity, not necessarily, but more importantly, I would like you to think about how this would unfold. Imagine a car that can be fed food. Let's say you just gather some water, and let's say there's some roadkill, blend it up, create a little slurry of nutrients, load it into the back of the car, and boom, you just refueled. Does this provide an incentive to hit deer? Potentially, but that's not our main concern. This is also going to be an intelligent creature. It can steer, it can drive, it will be able to control itself. All you do is ride it. You know how horses and horse-drawn carriages are better than autonomous cars? Because horses have an automatic crash detection system. If they're going to go off course, they'll just steer themselves back onto the road. Same thing with this, other than the fact that this thing doesn't have puny legs. It has the power of mankind's greatest, most influential invention, the wheel. Thank you for watching, and I will see you later with our next installment of Project Chariot.